His only warning to her was a whisper. I can't control the pain if I lose someone again. He thought it would push her away. He never expected it to be the very thing that made her stay. The wind screamed through the Montana mountains like a beast that had lost its mind. It slammed against the thick log walls of Josiah's lonely cabin, a fortress built against the world, shaking the roof but never breaking it. Inside, the fire glowed steady, a warm, beating heart in the chest of the wilderness. Shadows danced across his rough-hewn face as he sat by the hearth, knife in hand, carving another wooden wolf. Always wolves. They were the only companions who seemed to understand the language of his silence. At 39, Josiah looked older, weathered by a grief as relentless as the mountain winters. His hair had grown long, dark, with streaks of premature gray. His beard was heavy, untamed. His eyes, the color of a stormy sky, carried the weight of 15 years of solitude and loss. 15 winters had passed since a fever had stolen his wife, Mary, and their unborn child on a harsh Kansas prairie. In the days that followed, Josiah had not only buried them, but also the gentle, hopeful man he used to be. He had come here, to the highest, most unforgiving peak, to build a tomb for his heart. The cabin was his sanctuary, and his prison, no more than 20 feet across, built from pine he had dragged down the mountain himself. A ladder led to the loft where he slept on a bed of straw under thick firs. Below, a rough table, 2 chairs, and shelves of dried meat, herbs, and jars of preserves filled the space. His rifles hung above the door, always close at hand, a reminder of a world he had left behind but never fully escaped. Outside, his horse, Thunder, shifted in the lean-to stable, the only living creature Josiah allowed himself to trust. The storm outside had turned from a threat into a siege, a white wall of snow swallowing everything. Josiah knew such storms. Widowmakers, the old-timers called them. Blizzards that buried travelers, smothered wagons, and claimed lives without mercy. He added another log to the fire, its crackle a small defiance against the wind that screamed like a soul in torment. For Josiah, storms meant nothing more than waiting. He had food, firewood, and thunder. He had no reason to worry about anyone else. That was the way he lived. Alone, safe, unbothered. But then he heard it. At first, he thought it was a trick of the storm, the wind mimicking a human sound. A faint cry, thin and desperate, carried on the gale. He froze, head tilted, every sense honed by years of silence. There it was again. Weaker this time, almost lost in the howl, but undeniably human. Josiah's jaw clenched. A cold, familiar instinct told him to stay inside. Let the storm claim whoever was foolish enough to be caught in it. After all, nothing good ever came from caring. Caring was a vulnerability, an open door for pain to walk through. Still, his feet moved before his mind could object. His boots were on, his heavy buffalo coat pulled tight. Before he could fully reason himself out of it, he stepped into the storm. Snow slapped his face, 1,000 tiny needles, blinding and biting. Thunder whinnied, a low, uneasy sound, as if warning him against his own compassion. Josiah ignored it. His feet, driven by a memory of a duty he thought long dead, carried him down toward the old stage road. The trail was half buried, a white ghost of its former self, but he knew its every twist and turn. He moved through waist-high drifts, each step a slow, deliberate battle. Then he saw it. The stagecoach lay wrecked on its side like a broken toy, half swallowed by the snow. One wheel spun weakly, a final, futile gesture. The horses were dead, frozen statues in the storm. The driver hung from his seat, his head twisted at an impossible angle. Jed's gut tightened. He had seen death before, plenty of it, but something about this scene felt wrong. He saw the dark, round holes in the side of the coach. Bullet holes. This wasn't an accident, it was an attack. Then he heard it again. A sound so faint he thought he imagined it. A whimper, from beneath a snowdrift, near the overturned coach. Josiah dropped to his knees, shoving snow away with his bare, calloused hands. At last, fabric appeared. Dark, fine silk, not the rough-spun wool of frontier women. He dug faster, his breath burning in his chest. A gloved hand emerged, small and pale. Then he uncovered her face. A young woman lay curled in the snow, her chestnut hair tangled with ice, her expensive dress torn and soaked. Her skin was as white as marble, her lips nearly blue. City clothes, useless against the raw fury of a Montana winter. He pressed 2 fingers to her neck, fully expecting to feel nothing but the cold stillness of death. But there it was. A faint, thready flutter of a pulse. A life, stubbornly refusing to be extinguished. She was alive. Josiah stared down at her, a war raging within him. He could walk away. He should walk away. This woman wasn't just trouble. She was a ghost from a life he had renounced. Trouble meant caring, and caring meant loss. He had promised himself, on the frozen earth of Mary's grave, never again. Yet, his arms were already lifting her, her body impossibly light and cold against his chest. She weighed nothing, fragile as a bird, her head rolling against his shoulder. Hours later, after a brutal, uphill battle against the storm, they reached the cabin. He carried her inside and laid her gently by the fire. Her clothes were a shell of ice, cold enough to kill her. His hands, usually so steady, shook as he carefully unfastened the buttons of her ruined dress. It felt like a profound violation, undressing this stranger, but survival left no room for modesty. He wrapped her in a heavy buffalo robe, stoked the fire high, and hung her clothes to dry. Her face, in the warm glow, slowly regained a faint pink hue, though her eyes remained closed. Damp hair spilled across the dark fur, filling the small, masculine cabin with the ghost of a lavender perfume he hadn't smelled in 15 years. Josiah sat back, a profound sense of dread and resignation settling over him. His solitude was broken. His carefully built walls were already cracked. Hours passed before she stirred. A faint moan, then her eyes opened. They were green, the color of a summer meadow, and startlingly alive in her pale face. She looked around, confused, her gaze taking in the rough log walls, the flickering fire, and then, finally, him. Fear, pure and absolute, flashed across her face. She screamed, a raw, ragged sound, clutching the robe to her throat, scrambling backward like a cornered animal. "You're safe," Josiah said, raising both hands slowly, showing they were empty. His voice came out rough, a gravelly sound from disuse. "Your coach was attacked. Everyone else, they're gone. I found you in the snow." Her gaze shot to her fine silk clothes, drying by the fire. Horror twisted her features. "What did you?" "You were freezing to death," he interrupted, his tone flat, factual. "I only did what was necessary to save your life." Her eyes filled with tears as the reality of his words sank in. She whispered names, a litany of the lost. Mr. Hartley, Mrs. Patton, little James. Josiah could only shake his head. Her grief came like a flood, raw and ragged. He stood helpless, watching her sob, a reluctant witness to a sorrow that mirrored his own. He remembered his own loss, his own graves dug in frozen earth, but his grief had been a silent, solitary thing. At least she had someone to see her sorrow. When she finally quieted, her sobs subsiding into shuddering breaths, she wiped her face with trembling hands. "I am Lillian Whitmore, of Boston." Her green eyes lingered on him, weary but calmer now. "Who are you?" "Josiah," he said simply. "How long until we can reach a town, Josiah?" He looked at the window, where the snow still poured thick and relentless. "Storm's not done. Could be days. Could be a week." Her lips trembled. "A week? That's impossible. He'll find me." "This is Montana, miss," Josiah said, his voice unchanging. "The storms don't care what's possible. And neither do the mountains. Lillian pulled the robe tighter, a fragile shield against the cold, the storm, and the unreadable stranger who had saved her. She was trapped, and fate had locked them together in this tiny cabin on a forgotten mountain peak. 3 days passed. The storm would not break. Snow pressed higher against the cabin walls, a silent, white siege. And each night, the air between Josiah and Lillian grew heavier, thick with unspoken questions and shared griefs. She moved about the space now with a quiet purpose, no longer the terrified city woman he had dragged from the snow. She helped with meals, learned to split kindling, her movements precise and graceful, even in their unfamiliarity. She was something harder, sharper, and Josiah felt it every time her green eyes caught his across the flickering firelight. One evening, as she struggled to carve a piece of wood with one of his smaller knives, a desperate attempt to combat the crushing boredom, the blade slipped, nicking her thumb. Blood welled, a bright, shocking red against her pale skin. Josiah was at her side in an instant, his movements swift and sure, catching her hand. "Hold still." She winced as he cleaned the cut with a rag soaked in whiskey, but she did not pull away. Her hand trembled in his, impossibly small and soft. For a heartbeat too long, he held it, the warmth of her skin a searing brand against his calloused palm. Their eyes met, and something passed between them, a dangerous, undeniable current of life in a house dedicated to death. He let go abruptly, retreating to the safety of the hearth. The next morning, the sky had cleared for the first time. Pale, watery sunlight glittered on a world reborn in white. He saddled Thunder and led her outside. The sight stole her breath. Mountains stretched white and endless under a vast, pale blue sky. No sound but the soft hush of winter. "It's like the world has ended," she whispered in awe. "No," Josiah said, his voice quiet. "This is what it looks like when it's just beginning." She turned to him, her cheeks flushed pink in the cold. "How does a man choose this? To live where no one else dares?" Josiah's eyes met hers, and for a moment, the veil of his grief lifted, revealing a profound sadness. "Same reason a woman runs from a life in Boston. Some things you leave behind, and you don't go back." He saw the flicker of understanding in her eyes. He saw that she knew, instinctively, that he was not just talking about a place. "What did you leave behind, Josiah?" she asked softly. His jaw tightened. He turned back toward the cabin, the walls he had built to hold his sorrow now feeling like a cage. "Someone I couldn't save." That evening, the fragile peace shattered. "He will come for me," Lillian said suddenly, her voice tight with a fear she had managed to suppress. "His name is Barrett. He was my fiancé, my father's business partner. It was an arrangement. I am part of a contract. When I refused, he showed me what he was truly capable of. The men on that coach, they weren't passengers. They were good people trying to help me escape. Barrett's men killed them." Josiah listened, his face an unreadable mask of stone. The pieces clicked into place, the bullet holes, the wrongness of the scene. It all made a terrible kind of sense. Lillian looked at him, her eyes pleading. "You saved my life. You don't owe me anything more. When the snow clears, you can take me to the nearest town, and I'll disappear. You'll never have to see me again. You can have your peace back." Josiah stood up and walked to the window, staring out at the white, silent world. He thought of Mary, of the crushing, all-consuming pain of her loss. He thought of the single act of violence he had committed in his grief, an act that had driven him to this mountain to ensure the monster inside him would never hurt anyone again. He had built this life, this fortress of solitude, to protect the world from himself, and himself from the agony of caring. And now, this woman was offering him an easy way out, an escape back into the safety of his silence. He turned to face her, his expression grim. He had to warn her. He had to make her understand the man she was trapped with. His voice was a low whisper, filled with the ghosts of his past. "Lillian, I can't help you." She flinched, her face falling. He continued, each word a stone he was forced to pull from his own chest. It's not that I won't, it's that I can't. If something were to happen to you, if he were to find you,
I'm scared I won't.
if I were to fail to protect you. He took a ragged breath. I can't control the pain if I lose someone again. It breaks me. It turns me into something I'm not. I won't survive it a second time.
Fragile.
He thought his confession of weakness, of this deep, broken part of his soul, would finally push her away. He expected her to see him as he saw himself, a failed protector, a man too dangerous to be near, not because of his strength, but because of his fragility. He never expected her to stand up, walk across the small space between them, and place a trembling hand on his arm. "Josiah," she said, her voice soft but steady. "You think that's a warning, but all I hear is a reason to trust you." She looked up at him, her green eyes clear and certain. "I am not afraid of a man who is afraid of his own heart." In that moment, 15 years of ice began to melt. The confrontation came a week later. The snow had cleared enough for travel. 3 riders appeared on the trail, led by a man in a fine eastern coat, his face a mask of cold fury. Barrett. Josiah met them in the open, his rifle held loosely at his side. Lillian stood on the porch behind him, another rifle in her hands. "Give her to me, mountain man," Barrett sneered. "She is my property." "This is free land," Josiah said, his voice calm and steady. "And this woman is a free soul. She's not going anywhere." The fight was brutal and swift. Josiah moved with a lethal grace he hadn't used in years, but his actions were precise, defensive. He was not the wolf of his nightmares. He was the shepherd of his new flock. When the dust settled, Barrett's hired guns were wounded or had fled. Barrett himself lay in the snow, his legs shattered by a well-aimed shot from Josiah. "This isn't over," Barrett spat, his face pale with pain and fury. "Yes," Josiah said, standing over him. "It is." Weeks later, with the first signs of spring thawing the mountains, they stood in a small, dusty courthouse in a town far away. Lillian, her voice clear and strong, gave her testimony. The ledger from the wrecked coach, which Josiah had recovered, sealed Barrett's fate. Justice, it turned out, could sometimes find its way even into the darkest corners of the frontier. They rode back not as a protector and his charge, but as partners. The cabin was no longer a tomb, it was a home. The wolves on the mantle no longer spoke of loneliness. They spoke of a pack, of survival together. That night, as Lillian laid her head against Josiah's chest, she whispered, "You were wrong, you know. You can control the pain. You just needed someone to help you carry it." Josiah knew then that she was right. He had warned her he couldn't control himself around her. Now, it wasn't a warning, it was a promise. He would spend the rest of his life proving it. They had both been lost souls, wandering broken paths. But against the fury of storms and the cruelty of men, they had found each other, and in the heart of the wilderness, they had found their way home.